What did it feel like to taste the future for the first time? For some, it was a Vesta Beef Curry, a strange and exotic flavor in a world of boiled vegetables. For others, it was the first time they took an item off a shelf in a shop themselves, an experience so alien it initially felt like stealing. The 1950s wasn't just a decade of change, it was a decade of firsts. A time when a nation, still shaking off the grey dust of war, began to unbox a brighter, louder, and more colourful modern world. This is the story of that unboxing, one forgotten thing at a time. First taste of freedom. For 14 long years, choice was a foreign concept. The nation ran on the ration book, a landscape of limits and official portions that had lasted long after the war itself ended. Then, in February 1953, the first crack appeared in the grey wall of austerity. Sweet and sugar rationing ended, while the final end of all food rationing wouldn't come until July 1954, a moment described as a profound psychological turning point. This was a tangible taste of the good life returning. For a generation of children who had known nothing else, the effect was seismic. The corner shop, once a place of careful transactions, transformed overnight into a treasure trove of colour and possibility. The counter became a landscape of big glass jars, each filled with temptations. You'd see the iconic Spangles, those square fruit-flavoured boiled sweets, each with a little dimple in the centre, wrapped in their distinctive wax paper. Their slogan, from a more innocent time, was "The sweet way to go gay," using the word in its original meaning of carefree. The Derbyshire firm Swizzles Matlow released a trio of classics during the decade that became pocket money royalty. There were the chalky, lightly perfumed Parma Violets and the fizzy message-stamped Love Hearts, each with a short, sentimental phrase. Then, in 1957, they launched a chewy revelation that seemed to defy physics: the Drumstick lolly, the world's first chewable lolly. And you couldn't miss the products that now seem unthinkable. Sweet cigarettes were everywhere. These were sticks of chalky white candy with a red-dyed tip to look like they were lit, often sold in flimsy packets that mimicked real brands like Players or Senior Service. They allowed children to perform the rituals of an adult world they saw all around them, a world where smoking was ubiquitous. For a few pennies, you could buy a jamboree bag. It was a simple paper packet, a lucky dip containing a random assortment of cheap sweets, and, if you were fortunate, a tiny moulded plastic toy, a soldier, a whistle, a little car. The contents were never guaranteed, but the thrill of the surprise always was. As the decade closed, Macintoshes introduced the Caramac in 1959, a caramel-flavoured bar that wasn't chocolate but held its own for decades. Its recent discontinuation prompting a wave of national nostalgia. This wasn't just confectionery. It was the first tangible evidence of a new consumer freedom. First look at the world. In the early 1950s, the heart of the home was not a screen, but a piece of furniture, the radiogram. This substantial, polished wooden cabinet combined a radio receiver and a record player, its warm, valve-powered glow the centre of family entertainment. But a new device was waiting in the wings. Television was a rare luxury, a flickering curiosity in the corner of a handful of homes. Before the decade's great national events, Britain tried to manufacture its own optimism. In 1951, the Labour government staged the Festival of Britain, a grand exhibition on London's South Bank, intended as a tonic for the nation after years of austerity. It was a showcase of futuristic modernist architecture, most of which was temporary. Its iconic structures included the Skylon, a 300-foot-tall, cigar-shaped steel tower that seemed to float in mid-air, held by cables, and the vast Dome of Discovery, then the largest dome in the world. 2 years later, a real event captured the nation's imagination. The decision by the Queen and the government to allow the BBC to televise the entire coronation ceremony from inside Westminster Abbey turned the niche gadget into a national necessity almost overnight. Fearing they would miss this historic moment, hailed as the dawn of a new Elizabethan age, millions of families bought or rented their first ever television set. Renting was key. Owning these complex machines outright was too expensive for most. The broadcast itself was the largest outside broadcast ever attempted at the time. A monumental technical challenge for the BBC. It paid off. An estimated 27 million people, more than half the country, crowded around these little screens to watch the pageantry unfold. The set itself was a piece of furniture. The goggle box, as it was known, was a small bulbous screen set inside a heavy, polished wooden cabinet. It didn't look like much, but it performed magic. Viewing was a social event. If you were the one house on the street with the box, your living room became an impromptu cinema. Neighbours, friends and family would pile in, cups of tea would be passed around, and a hush would fall as the screen flickered to life. The event also generated a vast industry of memorabilia. Homes across Britain filled with commemorative mugs, plates, biscuit tins and tea towels, bearing the young Queen's image. These forgotten souvenirs are the material legacy of the moment television became a true mass medium. The first time the entire nation could share a single experience in the same moment. First burger. First date. Before 1954, if you were young and wanted to meet your friends, your options were limited to cafes serving tea and a slice of cake, or perhaps a lingering spam fritter on a canteen menu. But then new kinds of establishments began to appear, catering to new tastes. Increased immigration from Hong Kong in the post-war period led to the first Chinese takeaways, often opened in converted fish and chip shops, introducing the British public to dishes like chop suey and chow mein. But it was an American import that truly changed the social lives of young people forever. The Wimpy Bar opened its first location in London, becoming the UK's very first hamburger chain. The experience was a complete departure from the British norm. It was bright, it was modern, and it was implicitly designed for the young. It served exotic-sounding fast food like hamburgers and milkshakes, an alien culinary language for most. This became the natural habitat for a new social category, a group only just being recognized as a distinct economic force, the teenager. With more disposable income from post-war jobs and more leisure time than any previous generation, they had money to spend and a desire for spaces that were not controlled by their parents. The Wimpy Bar was a world away from the parental supervision of the pre-war era. It was a place to see and be seen, to spend your own money on your own food, and to participate in a culture that felt new and excitingly foreign. It was a favourite haunt of the Teddy Boys, whose rebellious style and association with rock and roll often landed them in newspaper headlines about rising juvenile delinquency. First taste of the exotic. For most of Britain, the kitchen was a place of labour, not leisure. Food preservation meant a pantry or a cold shelf, as only 15% of homes had a refrigerator even by the middle of the decade. Flies were a constant nuisance, battled with the hand-operated flit-pump insecticide sprayer or long, sticky strips of flypaper that hung from the ceiling. But in this environment, the first whispers of a wider, more convenient world started arriving in packets, tins, and bottles. Vesta convenience meals were a quiet revolution. For the first time, a family could have a plausible version of beef curry or chow mein at home. You simply added water and simmered. It was a taste of the restaurant experience, a hint of international travel from your own cooker, at a time when foreign holidays were a preserve of the wealthy. Before home freezers became common, there were surprise peas. These were freeze-dried and came in a packet, offering a convenient alternative to fresh or tinned vegetables, though their popularity faded quickly once the first frozen foods arrived. The larder was still dominated by tinned goods. A standard Sunday tea might be a ham salad, often featuring popular tinned salads from Heinz like potato or vegetable. For dessert, tinned fruit was a staple, particularly peaches or a fruit cocktail with its single prized cherry, served with the thick sweetness of evaporated milk. Another ubiquitous feature of the children's party table was blancmange, a simple dessert made from a packet mix of corn flour and flavouring. It would be turned out from a rabbit-shaped jelly mould, a wobbly, pastel-coloured treat. A new world of drinks was emerging too. In 1953, Babycham was launched. This light, sparkling perry was a marketing phenomenon. It was one of the first alcoholic drinks to be advertised on television, and it was specifically targeted at women, a revolutionary concept at the time. Its small, champagne-style bottle and cute leaping deer logo made it a fashionable and accessible choice. The rise of these branded goods was powered by a new force. The launch of commercial television, ITV, in 1955 provided a direct line into the nation's homes. Jingles and slogans became part of the cultural consciousness, with phrases like, "Don't forget the fruit gums, Mum," embedding themselves in the national memory. First sound of rebellion. Before rock and roll landed, Britain was swept by the skiffle craze. This was a form of DIY folk music, a democratic, accessible sound with roots in American blues. Its appeal was that anyone could do it. A typical group would have an acoustic guitar alongside a washboard played with thimbles for percussion and a tea-chest bass, literally a single string on a broom handle attached to an inverted tea chest. Its biggest star was Lonnie Donegan, and it was the gateway to music for a generation of future rock stars, including John Lennon and Paul McCartney. Then, in 1955, the screening of the film Blackboard Jungle unleashed Bill Haley and his Comets' Rock Around the Clock. It was a cultural earthquake. A year later, Elvis Presley's Heartbreak Hotel hit the charts. This new, loud American sound was met with teenage hysteria and adult moral panic. Newspapers reported on rock and roll riots, where cinema seats were ripped up by excited teenagers. This music was inextricably linked with Britain's first major youth subculture, the Teddy Boys. They wore a uniform of rebellion, long drape jackets with velvet collars, narrow drainpipe trousers, and heavy-soled suede brothel creeper shoes. Their hair was elaborately greased back into styles like the duck's arse. Parallel to this was a rebellion in women's fashion. Against the masculine, utilitarian styles of the war, Christian Dior's new look celebrated an exaggerated femininity. It featured a tiny, nipped-in waist and a very full, mid-calf length skirt held out by stiff petticoats to create an hourglass silhouette. Achieving this required a specific piece of engineering, the bullet bra. Its concentric circles of stitching created a stiff, conical shape, giving the bust a sharply pointed look that defined the era's style. This new culture had its own aesthetic. The heavy, dark furniture of the pre-war era was replaced by the mid-century modern style, pioneered by brands like G-Plan and Ercol. Their furniture used lighter woods and featured clean lines and splayed, tapering legs, designed for the smaller rooms of new-build houses. Walls were adorned with sunburst clocks with radiating spokes, reflecting an atomic age fascination with science. This new music and fashion demanded new technology. The stately radiogram belonged to the parents. The teenager's world was built around the Dansette record player. It was portable, affordable, and stylish, often finished in bright two-tone colors. For the first time, you could take your music, your 45 RPM singles, up to your own bedroom and close the door. It was an object that created privacy, a space for a new identity to form, one record at a time. First step into the supermarket. The daily rhythm of the 1950s was shaped by a pattern of shopping that had existed for generations. It was a world built on thrift and immense physical labor. The housewife's skill was in making do, darning holes in socks, unpicking the frayed collars of a husband's shirt to turn them around and re-stitch them, and saving all buttons and zips in a button box for reuse. Monday was washing day, a widely observed social custom dedicated to a grueling task. For those who could afford it, the height of technology was a trio of appliances. Water was heated in a Burco boiler, an electric copper. Clothes were washed in a twin-tub machine, then fed through a hand-cranked mangle to wring them out. For many, it was an entirely manual process, with a corrugated washboard and wooden washing tongs to lift heavy, boiling sheets. You didn't do a single weekly shop. You walked to a local parade of specialist stores. You went to the butcher for meat, the baker for bread, and the greengrocer for vegetables. This routine fostered a strong sense of community and personal relationships with shopkeepers who would fetch your items for you from the shelves behind the counter. The street was also served by delivery men. The milkman was a daily fixture, leaving glass bottles with foil tops on the doorstep and collecting the empties for reuse. And in many towns, the pop man from brands like Corona or Tizer would deliver fizzy drinks, taking back the used glass bottles from the previous week. Then, in the early years of the decade, chains like Co-op and Sainsbury's began to open the first self-service shops. The concept was revolutionary and, for many, deeply strange. Instead of asking an assistant, you took a basket and walked the aisles yourself, choosing items directly from the shelves. For a generation accustomed to counter service, this new freedom was unnerving. Some shoppers reported that the act of taking products themselves felt akin to stealing. It was the quiet, almost hesitant start of the modern supermarket, a shift from personal service to impersonal efficiency, and from daily errands to the weekly shop. First drive into the future. The soundscape of the 1950s street was a mix of the old and the new. For much of the decade, you might hear the call of the rag and bone man, often with a horse-drawn cart, shouting, "Any old rags," or lumber, as he collected scrap metal and unwanted clothes for a few pennies. The way people travelled for pleasure was also different. The great British seaside holiday was at its peak. Industrial towns in the North and Midlands observed Wakes Weeks, where entire factories would shut down and the workforce would decamp en masse to resorts like Blackpool, many staying in the highly structured, all-inclusive holiday camps run by Butlins, with their famously cheerful redcoats. Childhood, too, had its own journeys and crazes. Before plastic dominated the toy box, many dolls were made from composition, a mixture of glue and sawdust. Clockwork and tinplate toys were hugely popular, many of them imported from occupied Japan. The hobby of model making took off with Airfix kits, sold cheaply in a plastic bag at Woolworths. The decade was prone to huge, short-lived fads for simple American toys, like the Slinky Spring, and in 1958, the hula hoop, which sold millions in its first year. For young men, another journey was a universal rite of passage. Until 1960, national service was compulsory. For 2 years, men between 17 and 21 served in the armed forces, a shared experience that shaped a generation, many of whom served in conflicts like the Korean War or in Britain's remaining imperial outposts. But in 1958, a new sound began, the low hum of continuous traffic on Britain's first motorway. The opening of the Preston Bypass was more than just a new road. It was a concrete symbol of the future. It represented a Britain that was becoming faster, more connected, and more individualized. The launch of the iconic mini motorcar a year later, in 1959, was another clear signal of this coming car-centric age. The slow, local world of the horse and cart and the collective journey of the holiday train were being paved over. The future was about speed and distance, and it was leaving the rag and bone man behind. From the first taste of a spangle to the first drive on a motorway, these weren't just forgotten things. They were the incremental moments of a profound national shift. Each one was a small personal experience that, when multiplied by millions, transformed a country. It was the unboxing of a future defined by choice, convenience, new fashions, and new identities. The world of the mangle and the button box, of community routines and national service, didn't just fade away. It was replaced. One new object, one new sound, and one new flavour at a time, until Britain woke up and found itself in the modern world.